Hiya, I'm Eve. I work at Arts for Health. I do art therapy there. Welcome to another art therapy video. Today we're doing a process where we modify a previous image that we've made. So the idea is that we're going to get a previous image that we've made. So I've got a few that I've made in previous videos recently, and we're going to look at it and see what we'd like to change, what we'd like to modify for ourselves right now, and we're going to make a new image by modifying an old image. Okay, so materials that you'll need for your process today. The most important thing is that you have some images, some art process images that you've made previously that you are okay to work with and modify again. So I have a few from recent videos. If you don't have any art images that you're okay to modify, you could still look around and find another image that you are happy to modify, maybe something out of a magazine or printing an image off the internet. So apart from having a baseline image that you're happy to modify and change a little bit, we're going to need some pastels, paint, felts are useful, and then scissors and glue. So those are some materials that we need for our process today. Okay, so what are our steps for this process? The first thing is to lay out images that you have available that you're happy to modify. So I have a couple, I have 2 or 3 or 4. If you have one, that's okay. So you're looking at the image with no agenda, just noticing it like it's almost like the first time you've seen it, and you're noticing what stands out and what touches you. So what catches your attention, what makes you go, oh, that looks interesting, I'd like to explore more of that. So what we're looking for here in this first step is one element that we would like to explore and expand on. The second step is writing an intention. So an intention is just writing down in a sentence what I would like to do. So often an intention is written, I would like to explore ... and you can fill in what you'd like after that. But as always, there's no rules, so you can write your intention in any way that works for you, but the invite is there to write it down as I would like to explore, and then you fill in the blank. So the blank area would be the element of the image that you'd like to explore, that you noticed, that stood out to you. Now it's important to note here that this intention is just what you intend to do. It's not something that you have to do. You can still see what happens and go with the flow as you make the image, but this is our starting point. This is something that we'd hope to do, but if it doesn't happen, that's absolutely fine. It gives us somewhere to launch from, and it's like our first step to get us going. So you've chosen your image and you've chosen the element that is standing out to you. Now the next thing is to make a new image based on that piece that has stood out to you. So this is where we get into modifying and transforming. So something really important to do here is to check in with yourself and explore, how do I actually feel about modifying this image that sits in front of me and making it into a new one? What you can do as a first option is take an element and copy it. So it could be tracing, it could be doing a similar shape, it could be picking a similar color or a similar texture, being inspired by the first image. Another option is painting over or doing pastel over some elements of the original image, so adding paint, adding pastel to the original image. Or a third option is using scissors and actually cutting into the image in some way, or ripping and modifying it. So that's obviously the most heavy, significant modification, and I only encourage you to do that step if you feel happy heavily modifying your original image. So we do not have to cut up the image unless you would like to. So there are options there for us about transforming and modifying that original image. So we want to check in with ourselves about how we feel about doing a modification to our image, and notice what you feel and go with that. Now it can actually be quite fun to modify an image and to expand and explore one element of it. It can be quite exciting because it brings out new information or it brings new ideas to the front, but as I said, only do modifications as much as you feel comfortable. So this step now, we're making the new image, the modified, transformed image. So this might be on top of the original, or it might be on a new piece of paper, and they can sit side by side. The next step here is, as you start your modifications and your transformations, use a new type of material. So if your original image was paint, then use pastel to start yourself off. So something different from what you made your original image. This allows us to get a contrast and to bring in new ideas. And that's one of the main things we're doing with this process today. Then the final step is to do a written reflection and to go back to your original intention and write a little bit about what happened. Did I do what I intended to do, or did something else happen? And what does it mean to me? How does it make me feel? So that's our time for our written reflection at the end. At this point, you also add a title, if you'd like to your image that you've made. So exploring, what is this modified image brought out? What does it have to say to me? Is there a message coming from this image that will be useful for me for learning or for some sort of insight about myself or about the world? The other thing that written reflection allows us to do at this stage is to notice, what did we first explore in the original image? What did it mean to me previously? And what has changed, and what is the new meaning that I've got now? So there's a changing meaning. Okay, so what are the background ideas of doing this process? What are we aiming for? How can it be useful for us? So a major part of this process is exploring what it's like to change and adapt something by choice. So what is it like to have power to change something? So an image that we have, what did it mean to me then, and what can it mean to me now? But it's not only about change, it's also about expanding what was already there. So maybe in the original image there's some seeds of little ideas. It's very useful if we give it some time and then later on come back and notice what is happening in this image originally and what can I expand on now. It's like going one layer deeper on what was originally there, and that seed, the meaning that we originally had, it can grow a little bit more and get a bit deeper. So that can be really useful because it can deepen our understanding of the image and what we're learning about ourselves. So this process is a chance and an invite to explore more, to expand what we had originally, and to start to explore what it feels like to make change on our own terms and to modify things around us on our own terms. Because modification and transformation is such an amazing process and can be so useful for us as humans. It's very cool to explore the idea of change, and change being a healthy, positive thing for us as opposed to something that we can't control. So this is our chance to change something and to learn from it and expand and deepen it in a way that does feel good for us. Okay, I have made my transformed image. So underneath here are the pieces from the original image, and then lots of this is all added in, a few different pieces. That's from the original, and that's a new piece in there. So it's called Layers and Bridges of Peace. I wanted to explore the idea of peace that was around, in the original image, it was around having a protective layer around a moment of peace in the middle. So I wanted to explore those protective layers and the idea of peace somehow being inside a layer of protected safety. So as always, I didn't pre-plan everything I was doing. I went with the flow and what felt right to me. So what ended up happening was that I replicated some of the original image, some of the layers around the outside that I thought were sort of protective layers. I replicated those for a while. It was interesting to me that I had picked up on some of the original colors and shapes, and I just ran with that and repeated things. So that was a good way to start me off. As I was making it, I got to experience what it felt like to make multiple outside protective layers of peace. So I was able to expand that feeling and explore that and gently work through that feeling again and again as I made multiple layers, and that was powerful for me. Then it was interesting because after the replication, after I'd made a few images like this, there's another little one down there, I started to go, okay, I've had enough of that now. I feel satisfied with making those layers, and I started to explore what the layers, there's kind of like a wall here, what the wall might turn into. And it seemed to turn into waves and water, and it seemed to flatten out a little bit. So in my written reflection, I was able to notice that I started with a very firm wall, and then I moved to some waves, and then I moved to more peaceful flat water. And I noticed that process. And that was good for me because originally I didn't know that those were the steps that worked for me, getting from a protective layer to more of a calm, peaceful, flat water. So that was some good learning for me. Another thing that stood out to me was that after a while, I didn't even need to explore so much the peace itself as just the protective calmness. And it was almost like the protection and the feeling of safety was what made me feel peaceful. So that's another thing that I explored as I was writing. That's how I feel peaceful and calm. One final thing that stood out to me was that I started to make these little lines that came into the middle, and I called them bridges. So just pieces of colour that went into one of the layers, into one of the kind of walls surrounding layers, and then another one that just came through. So it almost felt to me like here's the outside world, and there's a little way, a little pathway, a little bridge for me to get into the next layer, and then into the next layer, and get into those deeper parts of peace on the inside. So I really enjoyed noticing that kind of warmth and pinkness, those warm colours, those are actually very new colours for me. I don't often explore these very much. That those colours allowed me actually like a bridge and a pathway into this central kind of protected spot. So that's why I've called it Layers and Bridges of Peace. And it really did feel to me like I was able to explore and deepen and expand that one piece of the original image that I chose. So in my reflection, as I've said, I did some of this writing where it allowed me to learn some things about what I'd done and what I felt and what I took away from the image. It also allowed me to remember what was my original intention and did I even do that. So my original intention was about peace and protective layers and applying them to myself. So there was kind of two parts there. I think I did explore the peace and the protective layers, and I didn't so much apply it specifically to myself, but I did learn things about myself. So as you can see, we don't always have to achieve our intentions. That's just our launch pad, and we see what happens from there, and then we use our reflection time to come back and check in and see how we went. So remember, art therapy isn't about judging or saying I didn't do the right thing. It's just about going with what feels right to your body and your emotions and your mind and your spirit, and working with what comes up in the present. So that's what we've done today. So thank you for watching. Please come back and watch our next videos, and I'll see you next time.